This meeting of the Syracuse Planning Commission. We have a series of public hearings for this evening, and we will proceed with them momentarily. First, we will take action on the minutes of our last meeting. Minutes have been distributed to the commission members. Is there a motion for action on our minutes?
So move.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The minutes from our March 13th meeting are approved, and we can move immediately into the public hearings scheduled for this evening. Just by way of process, for those who are unfamiliar with the process, as each application is announced by the staff, we ask that the applicant or the representative come forward to the podium in the front of the room, provide your name and address for the record, and then a brief summary of the application. Following questions and comments from the commission members, we will open up an opportunity to members of the public who wish to speak in favor of the application. And similarly, we will then invite members of the public who wish to speak in opposition to the application to do that. As you approach the podium, we ask again that you provide your name and address for the record, and then a brief summary of your comments, either for or against. And in both cases, we ask that comments be held to 3 minutes per person. I believe we have a timekeeper still on duty for that, but the timekeeper is otherwise occupied at the moment, but she will acquiesce in that task. And when comments are offered in opposition, we will invite the applicant to return to the podium to address those comments made in opposition. So with that, I think we're ready to begin with our first public hearing, please.
Good evening, Commission members. The first public hearing this evening is SP 2304. It's a continuation from March 13th for a special permit for a restaurant on property situated at 320 Lombard Avenue. TJW Asset Management, LLC is the owner. Domingo Ronaldo is the applicant. And the property lies within both a commercial Class A and a residential Class A1 zoning district. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on March 13th and agreed to continue the public hearing after providing comments to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which reviewed a companion exception application last week, where they approved the exception to allow the parking and driveway to encroach up to 50 feet into the residential zoning district. During the public hearing, the applicant's representative offered to reduce the area of the proposed wall sign and submitted a revised sign plan last week, reducing the sign area to 45.5 square feet. The proposal still necessitates 4 waivers with respect to off-street parking, sign area, street line treatment area, and rear yard treatment regulations.
Thank you. The applicant is here.
Yes. William Pitcher, 124 Fiegel Avenue, Syracuse, New York. Pitcher architect representing the applicant. Basically, those are the 4 variances that we're looking for. The sign was reduced somewhat in size. A week ago, I sent another letter to zoning noting that in the zoning regulations that the city engineer is the person of authority to determine which curbs should be installed, and I've yet to see any documentation on that. So we stand by the original drawing that we've submitted to provide curbs and sidewalks only for the length of the east area. Regarding the parking, the number of parking spaces, given the site, that's the number of spaces we can fit in there, allowing for future expansion of the other half of the building. Regarding the screening required to a residential zone, basically, we have a 35-foot difference between Fayette Street elevation and Erie Boulevard elevation. We have a steeply forested hillside between the two, and putting a fence up probably wouldn't even be visible from the upper area. So we're asking for a waiver on that, saying that the site conditions provide sufficient screening for the parking. Is that all the variances?
The landscape along the public right-of-way.
The landscaping basically is what was shown on the drawings, the curbs and the sidewalks. There is one more thing. Zoning requires an 8-foot area for landscaping. The building in the right-of-way line is like 2.5 feet at narrowest and like 6 feet, so we need a waiver for that. We can't provide that due to the physical conditions of the site. Those are the zoning issues. If you're interested, we have the applicant and the building owner here if you have any questions for them.
Thank you. So we have the favorable action from the Board of Zoning Appeals, an update on the project, which recap the 4 waivers being requested. Are there any questions for the applicant?
I have a comment to make. I
Please.
believe in your packet, there is an indication that the engineering report from the city is pending. So it's not that the engineer hasn't commented, it's reflected as pending. That's what I believe anyway. Staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but with respect to the curbing, I think it's under review.
In which case,
I'll just point out to the Planning Commission that the comments in your report were printed out on March 27th. The request for review was submitted to the various departments and agencies for the most part in early February for specifically, if you're looking for sidewalks.
We have the transportation engineer's comments on 3/13/23, but you're saying there's also the engineering department?
Well,
I believe that that report indicates that curbing is required on the entire section, and the position is, I believe from the developer, that that is not the right person, although we disagree that they have authority to make that recommendation, but I do note that engineering is still pending. Now, I recognize they've had it for a month, but it is still pending.
so in this case, would you recommend continuing the hearing after we hear public comment for the engineering report? Okay.
I would, because I'd want to know what their position is relative to curbing.
That clarification. Other comments for the applicant from the commission members at the moment? Thank you very much. Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come forward. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward. Okay, no additional speakers this evening, and as just noted in the conversation just concluded, for the reason noted regarding the report from the engineering department, we will continue to hold this hearing open, and can we...
I will personally reach out to engineering and
Thank
ensure
you.
that their report is here prior to your next meeting.
That would be great. Okay, thank you. So this hearing remains open, SP 23-04, and we move to our next public hearing.
The next public hearing is an appeal of a certificate of appropriateness denial from the Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board to replace 140 windows and an entrance door on property situated at 350 Montgomery Street. Shalimar Properties 407 LLC is the owner, and Michael Frisina is the applicant. And the property lies within a central business district, office and service district.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello. Mr. Frisina, I am not Mr. Frisina. My name is Tom Syrio. I am actually the single member of Shalimar
Sorry to interject.
Properties.
Can you just state your address for the record, please?
Yes, 443 South Warren Street, Syracuse, New York, 13202. I am the owner of the Mitzvah Towers. Mr. Frasine is out of town, which is why he's not here. So good evening, everyone. We're here tonight for a review of my company's application for a certificate of appropriateness for the Mitzvah Tower renovation. We applied for and were denied a certificate of appropriateness by the Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board on February 16th, 2023. We're asking for the certificate of appropriateness for the replacement of the entrant doors with a newer, safer, and more secure aluminum product, as well as what were approximately 140 hinged windows with a newer, more energy-efficient, and safer double-hung window. For a little history, the Mitzvah Tower's construction began in the early 1900s and was completed somewhere between 1912 and 1914. It was fabulous in its day, actually making it in Ripley's Believe It or Not publication. The property, unfortunately, has been in decline since 1988 and was taken by the city, not by choice, in 1997 for what was then back taxes. The city, after owning the property for plus or minus 7 years, had many developers attempt to salvage it. In 2005, it sold it again to yet another failed attempt by a new owner. Not only failing at the redevelopment of the building, but allowing it to fall in further disrepair, and they did not pay their taxes. For almost 30 years, the property has been vacant and rapidly decaying. My company acquired ownership in 2013. The roof was filled with holes, leaking water, snow, and ice throughout the entire 7 floors. Most of the windows were broken. The exterior wood, including the doors, were rotted and unsecure, allowing unauthorized access to the building. The interior finish of the building had been completely destroyed from water, ice, mold, and animal feces. On several occasions, glass from the upper floor windows actually came loose and fell to the sidewalk below. Because of the danger posed to workers, pedestrians, and the structural integrity of the building itself, my company immediately began steps to renovate the building starting in 2004 with a massive cleanup of the interior, as well as securing it from the elements, animals, and unwanted intruders. In the winter of 2019 and 2020, I received reports and witnessed window fragments and glass falling from the 6th, 5th, and 4th floors. In order to accomplish the securing of the building and minimize overall continued damage, approximately 130 of the 140 hinged windows were replaced. In addition, work began on securing the doors to the building, replacing the first of the 4 exterior entrance doors with aluminum-framed glass entry doors. It is our intention to replace the remaining doors in the same fashion. This was not a knee-jerk reaction to pick these products. I did some research and consulted with my insurance carriers as well as my attorneys. We discussed the safety benefits of double-hung versus single-sash hinged windows. They are by far much safer for residential use. In fact, some jurisdictions do not allow such hinged windows in mid to high-rise buildings. So, as you can see, may I approach?
Certainly.
I have some photos.
It's all the same.
Yeah, those are all the same.
Thanks.
But this isn't the
So,
building.
Correct. Yep, I'm going to get to that in a second.
It's just for comparison reasons.
The second one is the actual Mitzvah Towers. And as you can see from viewing the building from street level, the changes to the windows are complementary to the building itself, as well as the surrounding area, which is the other photograph that I showed you, which I think is the Onondaga County Courthouse.
Just to clarify the record, right, so the Onondaga County Courthouse is the other structure that's similar size and mass, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But not architectural detail.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right, okay. So, and my point is with those photographs, especially the one from street level for the mitzvah towers is you simply cannot determine from street level what type of material was used in the construction of the windows. The work has been undertaken primarily for the purpose of securing the mitzvah towers against environment and unauthorized entry, all while keeping an eye toward the integrity of the building to allow future office, commercial, recreational, and residential uses for the public to enjoy in downtown Syracuse. And for those reasons, I would ask that this board grant my certificate of appropriateness, please.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the applicant?
Nope, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So why did you not seek the approval of the Landmark Preservation Board before doing the work?
You know, so actually on the top four, really what I thought was that what we needed approval were the stained glass windows. That's really what I thought was needed approval. And I really have no excuse other than that. I didn't think it was, that was an issue with anyone, other than the stained glass windows, which are still there, by the way. And we vowed to work with the Landmark Preservation Board to put proper coverings over those windows to secure the integrity of the stained glass.
Do you have any photos with the original windows?
I do not. I thought maybe they were in the application, but I do not.
The comparison would be necessary for our
They're different. They look
deliberations.
different. Yeah, they do. So this window has 8 separate panes in it. I think
These are true divided lights?
yes. And I think the other one, I think the old ones had 12. And they were actually much smaller, the grids.
Yeah, I think we're going to need a photograph for the record to see that comparison, because it's just not in this photograph.
Yeah, it is not.
Yeah, you want to see the old ones first.
Okay.
And if the door was in question, we're going to need to see photographs of that as well.
So, let's see, I do have. I do have pictures of the old door. Oh, there's pictures of the new front door.
And this is also installed without approval?
Correct. Yeah, these doors, I mean, something needed to be done because people were continuing to break in.
Okay, this is not useful. Yes, you can't really see anything in this. Okay.
Doing the work without approval doesn't help.
Right, I know. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Then we get a full picture of the door, not just like half.
Sure. I thought that, let me see, maybe I do have a different one.
And we're going to need photos of the conditions before you, like what the original conditions were, so that we can see what the
Well,
Preservation Board saw.
here's some old ones that I actually was able to take off my camera. They're not great, but that's what the door looked like for the past, I don't know, 15 years maybe.
Okay.
Just as an example, here's some pictures of the other door that's currently there.
Okay.
That needs to be replaced.
Oops, sorry.
Mr. CEO, if you know, were any of the windows or doors replaced during the previous attempts at ownership? The other groups that owned the building, did they make any modifications you're aware of?
I don't know. Well, I know one modification that was made where a bunch of the small panels of the windows were stolen
Well-
from one of the previous developers, and
I was gonna say,
plywood was
unfortunately-
placed in those windows.
Right. I know that some of the glass, because it said mitzvah, those were collector's items, and some of those things were stolen at some time when
Yeah.
other owners had the building. We don't know who did that.
Right.
But,
We've got one, yeah.
okay.
I assume there's other work that's going to happen on the outside of the building?
Yes.
That was not part of your original certificate of appropriateness application?
Correct. And we have been and will continue to have discussions with the Landmark Preservation Board involving those, the stained glass covering of those windows, as well as the panels as well, the small panels that were taken out by someone else and now have, I think, plywood that's covering them. Those are actually going to be part of where there might be some apartments, some residential living. So we talked to the Landmark Preservation Board, and they're leaning towards being okay with allowing us to put some clear glass windows in there so that people can see outside. But that application has not been in front of the board yet. But it will.
Just about the conversation, if everybody else is okay. The conversation you're having with the Landmark Preservation Board about the overall project, are you doing it in sections with them, or are you now trying to go back and address?
No, it's done in sections. The next phase will be, I think, the final phase. And, not to speak for the board, I mean, I think most of the board toured the property. They were very happy with what's happening to the property. But, there was an issue, which I have no excuse for the windows on 6, 5, and 4. The 6th floor, 5th floor, and 4th floor.
Thank you, I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, well,
I have one more question. Considering their non-approval of the windows you have now, and the magnitude is going to be an historic building, have you considered other material that could also be safe?
Well, I mean, that's a question for experts of safety. I mean, the hinged windows, I did, yes, I did.
You use safety to support this, so that means you have some idea of what safety would entail.
I did, yes, I did look at other window types, and it wasn't just a cost issue either. In fact, these windows that I put in were more expensive than the hinged windows that I could have used, for that type of application. The openings are pretty sizable, and the information that we received was that it's kind of an attractive nuisance and an invitation for kids, if there are kids living in any of the apartments, to stand in that threshold of a window and have that Superman or Batman mentality and jump out of windows, which has been done in larger markets, which is why those types of windows are not allowed in mid to high-rise buildings.
I find it really curious, having worked in historic preservation for over 30 years and approved casement windows countless of times. That's the first I've heard of this in that amount of time.
There's literature on it.
I would just say we would need someone to support that.
Sure.
And the pictures of what this was like prior to you changing it.
And
lastly, just keep.
Yeah, you said you had 20, there was 140, you replaced 120, so there must be 20 original windows, so we should have photos of those.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And by the way, the new technology and the new thought process for those types of windows is to have a safety bar across the middle of them, because
That's okay.
yeah, sure.
So you could have had a casement window with a safety bar, which would have been a
Yeah,
good
and just for
solution.
clarification,
So-
I mean, I'm not sure what the definition of a casement window is, but these were not casement windows by definition of having a mechanical crank. They were just hinged windows.
Okay.
So there wasn't any mechanism on the window. They were just hinged
So how were they fastened?
by a hinge on the left and a little latch on the right.
I guess I don't remember that from all the time I've been in there, but the safety issues could have been addressed differently. In that these are inappropriate for this building, have you talked to the Preservation Board about how you might modify these new windows so that they could be more appropriate to this building?
Nothing in detail.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
You know what you're doing?
Sure.
All set.
So I think just what our thought process was, if there was a material, a cladding, if there was something that they suggested that might go over the windows, if it's now 120 in out of 40, that there's some way to retain the look on the exterior. I think that may be something to discuss with the board.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please come forward. Provide your name and address for the record and your comments. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Mike Stanton. I live at 315 Berkeley Drive. I'm on the board of the Preservation Association of Central New York, but I'm speaking for myself tonight. I haven't cleared my remarks with them. In my business life, years ago, I had a colleague whose favorite phrase was, you know, Mike, I always find it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And you could see how he worked his way through his job like that. He would put things, he would take actions without consulting others above him that should have been consulted. And after the fact, he would ask for forgiveness. At one point, they found he was padding his expense account, and he asked for forgiveness, and they said, no, you're gone. But that's the issue you're being asked to address tonight. Is it better to ask forgiveness or permission beforehand? Let me share some pictures with you. And the first two pictures, I believe, were taken in the 1930s. This is from a book about Gordon Wright, who was the architect who designed the building. He was an architecture professor at Syracuse University, designed quite a few buildings in the Syracuse area. This, you could argue, is his masterpiece. You can see on the first page, the skylights are still in operation. You can see the light streaming in. What a glorious public room that is. This building is right downtown. It's on Columbus Circle. When done right, it can have a big impact on bringing people back into the city again, but it needs to be done right, and we're not off to a good start here.
1 minute.
Well, in that case, the third picture shows a before of a window that's rotted out and you might think ready for the trash. The next picture shows it repaired, ready for sanding and painting. How many of the windows that were thrown out here could have been repaired? It's amazing what they can do now with windows that are endangered, rotted. I've seen whole corners of windows replaced and fixed for existing windows. The final page is about the federal and New York State historic preservation tax programs. Those are incentives to get permission rather than ask for forgiveness after the fact. Chris probably knows better, but a project like this could get anywhere from 40 to 50% of the project cost reimbursed. You do that by coming first to the Landmark Preservation Board and getting permission before the work's done. Then you can get 40 or 50% of that money back. By not going through that process, this owner is losing that opportunity. They could be increasing the budget and doing a better job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other individuals who may wish to speak in opposition to the application? Oh, right there in letters, sorry.
Uh-oh. My name is Don Riedke. I live at 112 Scott Home Boulevard in the city of Syracuse, and I'm chair of the City of Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board. Excuse me, I'm here to speak in opposition to the Planning Commission's granting an appeal to this application. As the applicant admitted, he did not come in front of the Landmark Preservation Board beforehand, and with the length of time and the ownership he's had of this building, there was ample time for him to have done so. But let me state it first and foremost, the Landmark Preservation Board is very, very much in favor of renovating and restoring this property. And we are very, very anxious to work with this particular applicant to secure those things that we need to secure so that this can be done as well as possible. We also, during the application process, had offered and had discussions with potential mitigations, even leaving the inappropriate windows, and that was not accepted. So we still stand open, we still stand ready to work with this applicant to see what we can do. I do have a picture here that gives a very clear example of the existing window versus the newly installed window, and there's just no comparison. One was a 12 separated side light or pane window. The other is a 4/4 vinyl clad as opposed to metal. I mean, everything is different about it. Yet at the same time, they're there. And as the previous speaker mentioned, the reality of doing something and then asking for forgiveness later is just not what the ordinance and just not what our zoning code in general is all about. And sooner or later, that's got to be stood up for. This applicant was in front of us a couple of years ago for a fire stairway in the back. So he knew the process, been in front of us before, but decided for whatever reason to go ahead and install 120 windows without coming in front of the appropriate board. That's wrong.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other individuals who may wish to speak in opposition to the application, please come forward and be mindful of the time limit, please.
My name is Sheldon Williams. I live at 511 Hawley Avenue in the Hawley Green National Register District for 48 years. While efforts to preserve an historic structure are always laudable, when it is not done right, it is cause for concern and very fine-grained consideration. Any purchaser of a major building in the city of Syracuse would readily be aware that this structure was on the National Register of Historic Places before that purchase was done, because it's been on that list for 20 or more years. And in the Montgomery Street National Register District. Any lawyer representing that property owner or that property purchaser would be required to do due diligence as to the zoning regulations and other regulations that might impinge upon the development of a real estate venture.
1 minute.
And a couple of points. So they should have started at the beginning with a competent architect and competent technical advice, and they should have dealt with the process from the very beginning. The casement windows are appropriate for a ecclesiastical Gothic structure, which is what that is. The county courthouse is English classical revival in style, entirely with sash windows, not casement windows. The distinction between them, you can't make a comparison between them, but rather the distinction between them is what is important architecturally and historically. And finally, at any state, at any point where the building remains and where historic fabric remains in the building, it is not too late to prevent the loss of that historic fabric and the historic qualities of that structure. And I recommend a reset with competent consultation and proper presentation under the law to the Landmarks Preservation Board and to the Planning Commission. This is done all the time and must be done to realize the value of the property.
I would ask that you conclude your remarks.
You got me, right at the time I concluded.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Other individuals who may wish to speak in opposition to the application, please come forward. I don't see anyone else rising to speak. Any additional comments from the commission members?
Only that I think we need the photographs, and what the chair of the Preservation Board provided was helpful, but I think the applicant needs to provide us with photographs of the original windows, the original door that's in question, so we can continue our deliberations. And therefore, I would recommend we hold this hearing open.
Given that there were members of the public that spoke in opposition, the Planning Commission may wish to have the applicant come back to the
Indeed, indeed.
Sorry.
And Mr. Chair, as I had indicated at the outset in terms of our process, where there are comments made in opposition, you certainly have the opportunity to address those if you choose to do that this evening. Your choice.
Not really much to address, but you did get a picture of the windows, and this nice young lady behind me gave me a picture she had on her phone of the door. Since I'm coming back, I guess I'll print them, but that was the door that was there.
That would be helpful if you could do that.
But we can, yeah.
This is the door that was there?
Yeah, that's what I replaced.
So that's not the original door? Somebody else, somebody...
imagine not.
No, I know it's not. So somebody replaced it before you did. Okay.
But that's the door that I replaced. And as far as, I think Don's comment about not participating in any ongoing discussions, I wasn't aware of that being a process. I mean, there was a denial, and I thought there was just an appeal. So if someone reached out to my office and no one responded, I apologize, but that certainly was not the intent. I did not receive a message from anyone. But again, as I stated in my original opening, we are certainly continuing to have discussions with the Landmark Preservation Board as far as the stained glass windows are concerned.
I would have one other question.
Please.
All righty. Going back to early in the process, if your design people or construction people took any photos before they started work, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Because one of the questions I had for you earlier, none of us on the panel know what any of the other owners did between the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. We don't know if anyone else did replace doors or windows.
Right. Okay.
So it would be helpful if we could see if there was anything else done to shore the building up.
Sure. I don't think there was.
Okay.
Other than that door that I just showed you.
Okay.
Actually, one other point of clarification in the photo that Mr. Radke gave us, with the original on one side and the replacement on the other, I had asked you if they were true divided lights in your new windows. You said yes, but this makes it appear as though it's an applied Mutton system. Is that the case? So it's not true divided light?
Well, I don't know. What's true divided light?
Literally 6 or 4 individual panes of glass.
Oh, correct, yes.
So they're just...
They're inside the double pane windows, yes.
Right, so it's an applied, it's not true divided lights like the original windows.
I don't know. What do you mean by true divided? It's double pane glass. It's not single pane.
No, it's not what I mean. I can't, nope, these were already replaced. Can't look at them. So there's one big piece of glass on the top sash, one piece of glass on the bottom sash.
There's 2 pieces on the top,
Well,
2 on the bottom.
But they're not 6 little pieces of glass or 4.
Actually, I don't know.
Okay, well, this makes it appear as though it's a big sheet with an applied system of mullions on it, which is then one other difference from the original, which was all a bunch of little pieces of
Right,
glass.
Yeah.
So if that's not correct, then just make sure when you give us the new photos that is clearer, because in here it also looks that way as well. Your photo doesn't look like they're individual pieces of glass.
I'm not sure what you mean by applied, but there's nothing applied from the inside or the outside of the window. Right? Is that what you mean?
I'm not sure how else I can say this. These are 2,
Well,
4,
there's
6, 8,
nothing,
10, 12.
there's nothing that you can take off. You can't take those pieces out.
It's a design term. So this is 12 individual pieces of glass.
Okay.
This is apparently one double pane above, one double pane, and then there's a grid that is integral to the sash
In
to
between
make it
them.
look like.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's just one other
Yep.
difference from what was there
Sure.
originally. And I just wanted to clarify that. So, okay, thank you.
Do you get that now?
Yeah.
Didn't mean to use the jargon,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's okay.
So, following that discussion, based on the request for the photographs, and comment earlier from my colleague, I think it makes sense to hold this hearing open until our next meeting, give you a chance to provide the photographs that we can review as we move toward deliberations on this. So this hearing remains open, CA-23-01A, and thanks to everyone who spoke this evening.
Is there a new date or not yet? Or will it?
Our next meeting date is 3 weeks
April
from tonight.
24th.
April 24th?
24th?
You'll get one.
We will, okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move now to our next hearing for a special permit.
The next public hearing is SP 23-05, a special permit for a restaurant on property situated at 3902 to 3916 and 3922 South Salina Street. ARG AR16PCK001 LLC is the owner. Gail Craig Thompson is the applicant, and the properties lie within a planned shopping district. The proposal before you tonight is similar to a proposal that the Planning Commission denied without prejudice in December of 2022 and reduces the customer area from approximately 3,200 square feet to just over 1,000 square feet, and the off-street parking requirement from 107 spaces to 36, but still necessitates 5 waivers from the zoning regulations.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Welcome back.
Hi.
We spent a few evenings together last year,
I feel like I live here.
and you have an update, a new project to present to us tonight, so please go ahead.
I'm Gail Craig Thompson, the owner of 3902 South Salina. And as you were saying, we have...
Ma'am, can you just state your address for the record, please?
Your home address.
Oh, my home address is 233 Kirk Avenue, Syracuse, New York, 13205. Okay, we have, the parking is down to 36. We're gonna have to put up a wall so that it'll be, 1,000, how much is it? 1,080 feet. So it require, is 36 parking spaces?
We have 39 now. On the site with Jim Nittles.
You wanna show? Here.
Say it again? Thank you. No, we-
Okay.
Well, do he have it?
Yeah, I have my tape. I'm all set.
we have.
Thank you.
And we're asking for a waiver for the Part C, the 24 feet with the curb cut. And, what was it? Another one. Oh, and number 4, to prevent the encroachment of vehicles on any portion on Salina Street, we're asking for a waiver for that also. And we've decided that we'll use a jukebox instead of the live music.
So it's a considerable change to what you had before, certainly in terms of utilization of the space. The wall that you're going to install, is that a removable wall, or is that a permanent wall?
That's a
A permanent wall.
Okay.
I would like to ask the applicant for clarification, simply because it's one of the deviations that you are, for the record, not requesting live and/or electronically amplified entertainment.
Right, we're going to jukebox.
Okay. That
So that
eliminates one of the
waiver
deviations.
evaporates.
There's no room after. Excuse me. After you cut it down for, you know what I mean, for, you know, live entertainment band or whatever.
Entertainers.
Yeah, right.
Questions for the applicant?
Before they leave, so number 14 in the staff report then is no longer applicable.
The live music.
Top of page 57?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. I'm on page 50.
Further questions for the applicants?
Just thank you. I know you've spent a lot of time on the project, and you've gotten a lot of input from staff, so thank you for running the city.
I'm good.
I'm all set for right now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll see if there are other comments. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please come forward. And just please provide your name and address and then your comments.
Just to be brief, my name is Andre Wright, and I live at 301 Cogswell Ave in Salt Bay, New York. And I just want to say I've been to the establishment a few times on Salina, seen, you know, family get together and for repasses and come together, and I just felt like it was a really good place. A lot of positive, you know, feelings there, and like we could probably use something like that in the community. And I would personally like to see it stay open. You know, I'm not sure with the politics of what's going on, why it was closed, but you know, it's just something that I felt was positive and is needed in that area. So I just wanted to speak on behalf of the family and the people that was running it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing so. Other individuals who may wish to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Stribley, 316 Monticello Drive North. We found out about this quite recently. This is a smaller bar / tavern proposal. So it's got improvements, but it also has some other issues. I've talked about the neighborhood location before. The concentration of troublesome facilities like the convenience store, the Ballantyne Apartments, which have been in the newspaper lately for the conditions. So they're right next to that. So we have a neighborhood that's quite vulnerable. We have single-family homes across the street on Salina, which are also threatened by all the commercial activity, and they're showing signs of stress. We submitted a petition against the nightclub. We didn't have time to really go around and talk about the bar. But we still have the same issue with the Elks Club cumulative impact, where we have a bar within one block that was approved by a special permit, and we have the same issues with that. I do hope the applicant is being honest regarding dropping the live music operation, because before he had high ambitions and was advertising very large events, and I just hope that is going to go away. The days and hours of operation, if they really are from 4 to 11, Wednesday through Saturday, they never were from 4 to 11. They went early into the morning at that location. So I'm concerned about that still. The fire code limit is 78 occupants. Behind that occupied area, there's 1,800 square feet of space that's big enough to accommodate additional activity. I'm worried about that because there was routinely overflowing crowds when they were operating illegally. So I think that space will be used for bar operations. It took us 6 months to stop the illegal operation. I'm bringing up the 39 parking places. I just brought up some comments about the issues with the dimensions and the operability of the parking. On this one end, the parallel parking, the stalls are too short, you can't get in and out of them. So at most, they could have 3 there, and you can't get in and out of these 3 angle parking places. They could replace it with 2 parallel parking places, so that doesn't really hurt them. That's just my comments I have to make. I know. I want to bring up, though, there's a very large unoccupied space in this building now, so we're going to end up with a dead space and a question about what happens in the future. So that's a new impact from this, or a new issue. This is not going to be
Conclude your remarks.
This is not going to be daytime operation. It's not going to be repassed. It's supposed, at least that's not presented. So we have all nighttime operation, and we have all these issues in this area. So we still have a lot of the same problems. So I urge your rejection of the application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other individuals who may wish to speak in opposition to the application? If so, please come to the podium. We don't seem to have any additional speakers for this application.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, with no further speakers.
Before you close the hearing, one of the comments made by the last speaker, I actually have marked up the site plan, and I had these concerns the last time the applicants were before us in terms of the parking layout, and I would agree that the 4 parallel spaces are really probably only 3, and the spaces on the north side of the building really don't work. There's just not enough room to maneuver a car. But even with those adjustments, it's not much of a deviation from the total number that they would need to have. But it is worth noting that depending on our action tonight, all of those should really be designed to industry standards. And also that the driveway curb cut on South Salina Street is still 10 feet more than what typically is allowed. So that's still a concern.
Oh, there. Since a comment was offered in opposition to the application, you as the applicant have an opportunity to address the comments made in opposition, and you're welcome to do that now by coming back to the podium, and if you want to offer any additional insight into the project. Well, any of the points that were raised in opposition to the project? No? Okay. Thank you. All right, thank you. In that case, I think we're in a position we can close this public hearing and consider action on the proposal.
Approval. Declaration granting the following waivers. Waiver of the driveway width, which I know is a civil issue with the engineer, right?
The most it can be is 30, and theirs is at 40, so it could be reduced to 30.
It should be reduced, right? Granting the on-site curbing requirements, granting a waiver of the street line treatment, and granting the waiver of arterial setback, since they've now made the parking numbers, granting the arterial setback requirement.
So I'm sorry, did you grant the waiver for the driveway or not?
Well, waiver for the driveway, we're saying, but it still could be reduced, even if we, is it now 30 and they want it to be 24?
No, it's 40, and it can be no more than 30. So,
So then not granting that.
Okay.
That one still has to be.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
So
you are not waiving the driveway?
The driveway width.
So on-site curbing requirement waiver, the street line treatment, we don't have to deal with entertainment waiver, and the arterial setback.
Yes.
So 1, 2, 3. One went away, and one is not being offered as part of this motion. Okay. Any other conditions as part of the motion?
Again, just having worked with staff, the conditions are that they continue to work with the, if it's engineering that has to deal with the width of the driveway.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion?
Just to thank the applicant for revising the application, particularly going to, moving away from live performances, which was one of our concerns given the proximity to the residential uses right nearby.
Further discussion?
They also commending you, as I said earlier, work with the staff on a number of drafts and revisions. We do appreciate the fact that you were committed to your project and that you made the changes to make this fit as much as it could. Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? SP 23-05 is approved. And we move to our next public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we open it, I just want to make sure that someone is here to present on this matter. Can we ask if there's anyone here on this particular application, SP 2306? Okay.
So the next public hearing is SP 2306, special permit for a transitional parking lot on property situated at 326 Holly Avenue. Burnett Avenue LLC is the owner, Bonton Glass is the applicant, and the property lies within a residential Class B zoning district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, easy to read. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can share the two of us. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Christian Freeman from Keplinger Freeman Associates. I live at 121 Ruskin Ave, Syracuse, New York, and I'm here representing Bonton in regards to amending our plan for this project. Our initial submission for this project showed a parking lot being placed that has 8 parking spaces in it. The business that we're looking to provide this parking for is actually on the opposite side of the front setback of this parcel. So it's at the back of the parcel that you see. They currently have no location for parking. They have 17 employees, and they've worked in this neighborhood for 53 years. They're Bonton Glass. They're a member of the Syracuse Builders Exchange. They do local work, and they love to stay in the neighborhood. Currently, they are parking on lawn, which is a violation. It's not allowed. We would like to provide parking spaces so that their employees can get to work in a neighborhood they'd very much so like to stay in. Our initial submission, to which the commission had 2 comments on, is amended in this scheme I've just pitched before you. We have not officially submitted this, but the reason I'm here is to ask that we can sort of touch up our plans and make them appeasable to the members of the neighborhood and the Planning Commission. The 2 comments that the Planning Commission has given us is that the width of the driveway was too wide and unallowable in this area. We have no problem slimming down that driveway width. In my little sketch there, you can see it's now shown at 12 feet wide, as it was shown at 22 feet wide. In this way, it'll feel like a more residential driveway. Another comment that was made was that in order to respect our neighbors, we would have a 10-foot wide landscape buffer on all sides of the property. Our rear access is actually access to the site, so we're not going to buffer that. That's how the employees would get in. However, understanding that we're in the Hawley district, a district that has particular cultural character and a neighborhood style to it, we'd like to buffer the sidewalk and pull our parking back, 3 parking stalls back, for a total of 28 feet from the sidewalk, which would give area for us to put in an ornamental fence, some buffer planting areas, and maybe just add to the character of the neighborhood instead of just letting that area remain as a vacant lawn. So instead of us looking at this project as, oh no, it's parking, the way I think Bonton would hope to be accepted by their neighbors is we're adding to the character of a district that they very much so like to stay in. I can take any questions.
Are there questions for the applicant?
No. Not for me, thank you.
All set, thank you.
So this, the changes have been formally submitted to the office?
They said they haven't.
They have not.
Okay.
I'm here to basically say, please let us submit them.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come forward. Are there individuals who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward. So sorry.
We have a couple of people.
My name is Glenn Lewis. I live in the neighborhood. I reside at 418 Howard Street. The Hawley Green Historic District is an interesting and diverse district in terms of the demographic of the people that live there, as well as the housing types. There are a number of housing types, both large and small residential structures, as well as townhouses. It's a neighborhood that needs to be supported. This project is an encroachment on the residential district. The lines are clearly drawn, and this project would overstep that boundary. It isolates a building that has been occupied for quite some time and making it an island, basically. So there'll be a parking lot on either side of a residential building, diminishing the property value, essentially, of that property. So what we would like to see is that the project go back to the Landmark Preservation Board and have more appropriate comments from that body, and then come back here, and that'll give all of us a chance to look at the new proposal, rally together other people, and determine if the changes that are presented are in keeping with our vision of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Other individuals who may wish to speak in opposition, please come forward, provide your name and address, and up to 3 minutes worth of comments.
Sheldon Williams, 48-year resident at 511 Hawley Avenue. My opposition to this transitional parking, to approval of transitional parking, is the same as my reasons for opposition to the transitional parking at the Regency Tower on Wayne Street that was withdrawn a couple of months ago. The proposed project of a parking lot connected with a commercial business that is in a different zone outside the boundary of the Hawley Green National Register District. It is an intrusion into the National Register District, and I believe that the Planning Commission must draw the line on this kind of incursion. Question regarding rezone Syracuse. If I'm not mistaken, my reading of it shows that transitional parking serving a commercial district but located in a residential district is no longer permitted under the proposed zoning ordinance. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that will no longer be permitted, which would be a good thing if that were the case. If that's not the case, it should be written into rezone Syracuse. Intrusions into the residential B zone were disapproved this same property, 326 Hawley Ave, in 1944, 1946, and 1980. I was involved when Dighty Diaper Service, Bonton was across the street on Burnett, the other side of the street. Dighty Diaper Service wanted to expand with a loading dock and other uses on the Hawley Ave side. We opposed it at that time. There were a number of people in opposition to it, and they withdrew that application in 1980. Fewer parking spaces are needed than are indicated. I walk by there all the time, several times a week on the Burnett Ave side, and I usually see 4 to 6 cars parked on Burnett Ave legally, and there are some cars. This is entirely on the frontage, the brick frontage of the Bonton, the 2 buildings on either side of their loading docks. So I don't see a need for additional parking, but there are several parking lots in the area that are underutilized. And for instance, the 443 Club, there are 3 spaces outside their gate and many spaces inside the gate that are not used. And they are certainly not used during the day when Bonton has business hours.
I would ask that you please conclude your remarks.
The Burnett Ave sidewalk is in poor condition, not according to city ordinances. The rear entrance from the building to the proposed parking will cross the property line and district line. I believe there's a building code issue there. There is no fire-rated door at the property line.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Other individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the application, please come to the podium. We don't have anyone else rising to speak. Do you wish to address some of the comments made in opposition?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate one more time. We have 17 employees at this business that's been there a while, and they'd really like to stay. So we're going to do whatever we can to try and make our neighbors respect our project and accept it. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Legal Counsel, a little guidance here. We have an application that was submitted. We heard this evening that there's an interest in revising that application considerably. It's not been formally filed yet. Would we be better advised to leave the hearing open and let those changes catch up with the process and return to deliberate on an updated plan once it's been filed with the office and presumably gone through review by the Landmark Preservation Board as well?
I think that we would probably just close this and ask them to resubmit. It seems like it's going to be a substantially different project, and so would just go through the process and come back before this board.
I would offer that in reading the staff report, with all due respect to the applicant's willingness to work with the Preservation Board, that it's the very idea that it's parking, not the design of the parking, that is the problem. So I would recommend that we would close and act on this, and if the applicant wants to broach a conversation, they can, but I think we should be honest about what the Preservation Board and the neighbors' comments have been, and it's just that it's parking that is the issue, not necessarily the design of it. So I would recommend we close and act tonight.
That?
Chris wants to close the hearing and make a decision tonight.
And then they can, if they want to, refile. No different. So, yeah, we think you can do that. And then if there are substantial changes and the applicant wants to refile, they're free to refile based upon any changes they've made based upon what they've heard tonight.
Prejudice means they can modify the plans, but
Okay. On that basis, we will close the public hearing and entertain a motion for action on the proposal that was formally submitted.
And you would do it without prejudice to refile. Right.
I would point out, for the interest of the Planning Commission and the interest of the applicant, if you deny without prejudice, you're implying that there are design changes that could be made that the Planning Commission would find acceptable. My understanding from Ms. Capella-Peters' comments and the Landmark Preservation Board, it's not a design issue, it's a land use issue. So when you make your recommendation or decision, I would ask that you consider denial versus denied without prejudice, and whether, if there are design corrections that can be made, then denied without prejudice would be appropriate. If there are not design issues that the Planning Commission would find appropriate or acceptable, then it would not be appropriate to deny without prejudice. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thank you. So the hearing is now closed. Is there a motion for action on the proposal?
I move denial of the application.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
With or without prejudice?
without, it's
Not
just
without
denied.
prejudice.
With.
Okay.
With.
Okay.
Just for clarification, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries. And we move to our next public hearing.
The next public hearing is SP 2307, a special permit for indoor amusement and recreation in order to establish an e-gaming facility on property situated at 200 West Jefferson Street. Onondaga County Industrial Care of Most is the owner. Rob O'Connor with Elite Gaming is the applicant, and the property lies within a central business district, general service A zoning district.
Evening.
Rob O'Connor, 7303 New Route 31, Baldwinsville, New York. So it's a little bit of a misnomer, Elite Gaming. We're an esports facility, so it's competitive video gaming. We plan on working heavily with local high schools. We've already met with quite a few high schools who wish to adopt esports as part of their school activities, after-school activities and things. It's becoming very popular. It's done all over the country, actually. So we've met with several school districts already. Some have already adopted it and have brought esports to their schools. The part they like about it is it's very inclusive. Anybody can participate in esports. Doesn't matter if you're 250 pounds, 6 foot tall, or 5 foot tall, 100 pounds. It doesn't matter. And what they found is kids that participate in esports in schools, 80% of them have never participated in a school activity before. So it really grabs the kids on the margins that don't normally participate and maybe don't quite fit in at school. It gives them something to participate in, and when they're participating in school activities like this, their attendance goes up, their grades go up, their well-being goes up, and they learn a lot of the soft skills that you would with a traditional sport: teamwork, coaching, time management, all the soft skills that are great about traditional sports are exactly the same when it comes to esports. So that's what we're going to be doing at the facility there inside the Most Museum. We chose that location because they're already at the Museum of Science and Technology, and that's exactly what we are, science and technology. We're going to be working very closely with the new STEAM school that's going to be going in, and we're working with the folks that are bringing an animation studio into Syracuse as well. They use a lot of the same equipment that we use, so they're very interested in working with us. And what we're also going to be doing too is providing pathways for students who wish to pursue a career in the gaming and esports industries through whether it's graphic design, computer programming, IT, or video production, sound production. And what's great about the gaming industry is a lot of those activities are transferable directly to other industries as well, like the TV and movie industries, graphic design, IT, you can go anywhere with it. But what's great about gaming is it's a great way for kids to get introduced to the technology. Kids that game are 3 times more likely to enter a STEM career than kids that don't game. So the saying in the gaming industry is, gamer today, engineer tomorrow. So if we can encourage them to participate in activities like this, and another great thing about esports too, it gives them a place to gather with their friends, keeps them off the streets, keeps them out of trouble, and all the schools that have esports have adopted the code of conduct the same as any traditional ball sport. So they have to have attendance at school, they have to have grades, they can't get in trouble at school, they can't get in trouble at the facility. So they hold the esports athletes to a very high standard. So that's what we plan on doing at the facility.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
So most of the participation, I assume, is in person, but is there opportunity for remote participation?
Absolutely. Yep, we'll do both. Yep, we'll have our plan is to have a facility there where high schools can get together periodically to compete. So Liverpool and Baldwinsville would come together and their teams would compete at the facility, or they can do it remotely too. That's with COVID, esports really accelerated quite a bit, and because people were home, so we have the opportunity. The kids have the opportunity to participate. A lot of the schools are building dedicated esports labs right inside the school.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant?
So you're in the far west end of the building, the old stables?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And do you have a direct exterior entrance, or do you go through the Most to get to you?
We have a direct exterior entrance.
Okay. And so is there signage part of this package?
No, not yet.
So you don't anticipate needing signage?
Yes, we will. We'll submit that.
You'll be back for that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's no alterations to the exterior of the building to accommodate you folks?
No.
Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions?
right now, your plan is to be part of the most curriculum. In other words, you're not connected to one particular school. You're going to be working with an age range of adolescents through the most.
Correct. Yeah, we'll be working in conjunction with the most, with some events. We will be a separate entity, but we will be working with the most whenever they hold activities that fits what we do. Yes.
All right. And the capacity of this, I'm trying to read the plans. What are your thoughts on the capacity of gamers you're actually going to be able to have? There's a lounge, there's a playing area. How big is that?
So there's about 12,000 square feet total there. Right, I mean, we would be able to, without doing any modifications inside the building at all, accommodate about 40 students.
40, okay.
Yeah, yep.
And right now, it's area high schools, you think?
Yes.
And the two colleges in the area that have some e-sport, are you going to connect with them?
Yes, yeah, we've already met with Herkimer College. They'll be launching an esports management program, an associate degree, and Syracuse University just announced they're doing a 4-year degree with the Fox School of Business Management and the Newhouse School as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, the gaming industry is big. It's bigger than the movie and music industries combined. So, and part of our goal, too, part of our mission is to bring the gaming industry here to Syracuse to offer more opportunities for young people to pursue careers in the gaming industry while still staying here in Syracuse.
Thank you. No other questions.
Thank you very much. Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application, please come forward. We have no additional speakers. I think we're in a position to close this public hearing and entertain a motion for action on the special permit SP 2307. Is there a motion?
Move approval of the negative declaration.
Second, because I had a comment to it, though. In regards to the signage, just with the condition that if you do intend to make any changes to the signage, that you obviously come back in front of the commission.
Discussion on the motion then is elaborated? No? Then all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? And the special permit is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ran out of hearings.
No whammy. Wait a minute, Jeff's still in the room.
However, we haven't run out of business. We've just run out of public hearings. We have old business items to consider, a discussion item, and the authorizations for our second meeting later this month. Jeff, can you give us an overview on our first old business item?
Yes, the first old business item is PR 1704M2, project site review modification for demolition and new construction to modify the previously approved floor plans and elevations on properties situated at 728 East Genesee Street. 728 EGSU LLC is the owner and the applicant, and the property lies within a business Class A zoning district. The applicant is requesting to modify the floor plans and elevations that were approved by the Planning Commission in June of 2017. The overall approval at the time was to construct an 11-story apartment building with 191 dwelling units. The applicant is now proposing to replace a mechanical room, a rooftop mechanical room, replace that with a full 12th floor of dwelling units, increasing the dwelling units from 191 to 201, and removing vehicle parking stackers from a ground level parking garage, reducing the number of off-street parking spaces from 100 to 37, and changing the cladding material. The Planning Commission did review the proposal on March 13th and requested the applicant to reach out to the East Genesee Regions Association regarding the proposed reduction in on-site parking. The applicant was requesting or proposing to install satellite parking, approximately 88 satellite parking spaces on properties situated on East Washington Street. They've revised that proposal to include 113 satellite parking spaces at properties situated at 700, 706 to 708, 712 to 716, 718, 720, 722, and 724 East Washington Street. The proposal necessitates an expanded density waiver. It still necessitates an expanded parking waiver. The proposed satellite parking cannot be counted towards the parking requirement, but can be offered as justification for the parking waiver. Again, just as a reminder, from March 13th, there have been 5 time extensions granted as part of this proposal. If this modification is approved, an automatic time extension will kick in, as the applicant will have a year from the date of approval to complete any construction. And it does look like the applicant's representative is here to answer any questions you may have.
Sure.
Did we get comments from the East
Yes, you
Genesee
did, and
Regions
I was so busy talking.
No, you were working.
Thank you very much.
And the applicant is here, and I think at the our last meeting, you gave us...
Jeff.
I think at our last meeting, you gave us a good overview of the substantive changes in the project since
Correct.
its original or most recent approval. And the discussion last time centered around the parking question and how to address that. And you were encouraged, the applicant was encouraged to have some dialogue with the merchant organization in the neighborhood. And can you kind of report back on how that went?
Sure.
We have some respondents from EGRA. It flowed from your conversation or conversations with
Yeah.
them, but maybe you could give us a sense of how that went.
Sure. We had 3 conversations with EGRA. We had an initial conversation with the developer, the current project owner, myself, and an attorney. The EGRA, that initial conversation was with the entire EGRA board, as well as Dave Mankiewicz, who's their staff person through Center State CEO. I had 2 follow-up conversations, one with Beth Trumfio, who is the chairperson of the board, as well as a confirmation conversation with Dave Mankiewicz on Friday. The reason for the multiple conversations was that while my client was looking to secure additional parking spaces, we did not get confirmation from EGRA as to what they would consider an acceptable number of parking spaces at any point until Friday, when I asked Dave to at least check in before I wrote my updated request, and he said that EGRA will only support a 1-to-1 ratio of parking to dwelling units, which in this case, due to the previous waiver, would have required for us to find 76 additional parking spaces for the 10 additional units. We understand the concern that they have, which is their concern is that tenants of the buildings, if they're not provided with parking, will park on the street overnight and compete with customers for their businesses. I do recognize that concern. Their other point that they attempt to make, that the cost of parking is at no cost to the developer because it can be passed on to the tenant, I don't think is a realistic point. There's only so much cost you can pass on to the tenant before they're just going to park on the street. The building, due to the location of the church, there is a very limited ability to move vehicles around the site. We have one area where we can get a car into the building, a very narrow parking garage that wraps around the church, and there really isn't enough space for a ramp or even a vehicle elevator to properly move vehicles up and down if we were to try to get additional parking on site except for the stackers. One point we did have agreement with EGRA on is that they agreed that the off-site parking would be more useful to the tenants than the on-site parking stackers because of the management issue of having to call ahead, get your car out 15, 20 minutes before somebody actually does it, and that represents something that would actually discourage people from using the in-building parking. So they did agree with that pushing more spaces off-site rather than having the on-site stackers was preferable, but their parking request for one parking space per unit was something they weren't continuing to be flexible with, and in their mind, asking for the 10 additional units required us to go one-to-one for the whole project. I mean, personally, I don't know that providing a parking space for every unit is really the way to avoid parking congestion in that area along East Genesee Street. It seems like much more of a enforcement issue with the city. I do think that the city could easily provide 24-hour metered parking and solve the issue that way. So that's the summary. We were able to source 25 spaces. One other thing I did want to point out, and I pointed out in the modified request letter there, is that on a per bed basis, the 150 parking spaces that we're indicating is actually almost twice as much as some of the most recent approved apartment projects, where if you look at them on a per bedroom basis, which some of those are student housing, so it's a tenant per bedroom, we significantly exceed that of any other large recently approved project. With that, I guess, do you have any questions for me on those conversations?
Questions?
All set.
Okay, I
do think
I'm going to go back to the change in the number that you're providing off-site. At one point, it was 88. Now, how many is it total?
150. Or no,
113.
113, sorry. 150 total.
See, it's easy for me to be confused, but thank you, both of you. So approximately 36 on-site and then...
37 on-site.
And then 113 off-site.
Correct.
I wish I'd kept the game reserved. There did big screen. Thank you for clearing that up.
I had to recount it a lot of times to make sure I understood it.
150.
Yes. And the 37 spaces is what the capacity is on site without the high-density parking stackers, as well as moving some mechanical equipment into that level.
So any further questions for the applicant?
All set, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
I do want to just observe that one parking space per unit, while I understand that that's in our current zoning, is extremely unusual for an urban area, and reflects, honestly, that there's a limited amount of these surface lots to piece together to get these parking spaces, and that becomes additional urban fabric that's not really able to be returned to the streetscape. So I do think that it's an unnecessarily onerous expectation, but I'll leave it to the board to make that decision.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the update.
Just for clarification, for the board's sake, I have not, the zoning office has not received any rental agreements or written documentation demonstrating the 113 leased spaces. So I would just ask the Planning Commission to consider, if you're considering approving the proposal, that any approval be conditioned upon the applicant providing lease agreements or something similar for the 113 satellite parking spaces.
The property owner that they'd be leasing the spots from, they own the lot with the 88 spaces, but they would be leasing the additional. The property owner asked them for a fairly significant charge to sign a letter of intent, so they were going to do that based on the outcome of this conversation.
Thanks for the clarification. With that in mind, the updated information concerning additional off-site parking, is there a motion for action on the modification to the site plan review?
I would also just note for the board's consideration, if it is of any import, this property is located on a bus route, which should be a factor considered in reduction of parking spots, and to the extent it is of any value for you, once, assuming rezone eventually gets adopted within the next couple of months, there would be 0 parking requirements for this property in this zone.
The bus stop's actually directly in front of the building.
Okay, good information to have. Thank you both. So then we are at liberty to act at this stage. We have the most up-to-date information regarding the revised project. Is there a motion for action on this PR 1704M2, as we call it?
Do we have to spell out the fact that the extension's included, or is that, you said automatic?
Automatic.
Okay, because I am the deliberative one, and I would painstakingly list it all. Move approval, granting the modification, conditioned upon proof that there is the arrangement for off-premises parking. And again, this is an extensive record. We've granted five-time extensions on the project. So we had an extensive record that supports the fact that we certainly wanted to support the project with all its changes, retaining the church, but at the same time recognizing that there is a finite amount of time that can go into one developer working on the site. That's the complete motion.
With a seeker determination?
With a negative declaration.
Second. I'll second the motion so we can move to discussion. Is there discussion on the motion?
I think there are legitimate concerns about where the residents park, and that parking on the property is more convenient than parking 2 blocks away. Because as urbane as we all think we are, we're pretty much provincial, so I still think that that's going to be an issue.
Further discussion or comments?
Well, in other, again, taking the broad view of the records that we've discussed, multiple ventures, including one that was scaled down and passed tonight, we have looked at alternate parking and parking that's under agreement by other businesses and parking that's under agreement with other neighborhood associations. And we've asked for those other applicants to provide proof that the parking is in hand. If that's the concern, certainly as the person making the motion, I'd be willing to.
No, I'm sure they could come up with the agreement. For me, it's more the literally how people use it. Sure. And that the convenience of it in the building or on the property versus not, for whatever price they charge their tenants, there's still going to be, and in spite of whatever rezone says, again, I still think there's a certain demand that's going to be generated, and all the others of these projects that we've approved lately, although they've used some satellite locations, they've also provided a greater percentage of what they were required to provide on the property versus not. So like the one, whatever the one was, we did the I still think of it as a Genesee Grand, whatever it's called now, that proposal, right, for whatever number they had, a greater majority of what they had to provide was provided right on the property versus whatever else, as well as the one across the street from that, as well as the one around the corner from that. So I'm thinking about parity, that's all. So, but I'm only one.
Do we need time for homework? Do we need time for anything else?
I'm good. I'm good.
You're at the podium. I assume you want to say something.
You guys can have your discussion. I do want to point out that we have the on-site restriction of the church is a significant restriction to how much we can park on that site. Truthfully, we could get 200 parking spaces on that site without the church because we'd have enough room for a ramp to have multiple levels of parking. It is an impediment. I'm not suggesting removing that building. I wouldn't be part of the project if we were. But it is I do believe it's a legitimate contributing factor.
Not denying that. I agree, and I can find the site plan quickly. I'm not going to design here at the podium. I'm just wondering if there isn't an opportunity to use more space behind the church where you could have picked up a ramp. But again,
I've studied it. I can send them to you if you want.
Pardon me?
I've studied that. I can send it to you if you want. It would be, it really didn't quite fit.
Thank you.
Discussion among the commission members? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? We have a 2-2 vote. It is tied, which means the motion does not carry. And we move to our next item of business. Thank you for being here and for the update.
The next
one
item.
other simple item.
The next item is Z2854, rezone Syracuse. The city's effort to adopt a citywide zoning regulation, and the city of Syracuse is the petitioner. Just as a reminder, the Planning Commission held a public hearing last week on March 28th, I believe it was. Bottom line, the City Planning Commission is responsible for providing a recommendation to the Common Council, which is the deciding authority regarding the proposed zoning regulations. I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thank you.
So you can have additional discussion if you wish. If you wish to render a recommendation, or if you want more time to consider the submittals from the public hearing.
I actually have a couple procedural questions for you. Thank you. Sorry. Or one of those lawyer people over there. So, as one of 3 bodies that's impacted by rezone, do we have an obligation to ask the BZA and the Preservation Board to provide us with comments? Is there anything in the zoning rules that say we should reach out to them?
No.
Okay, so that's different than, for example, the county planning board, which we have to get their comments before we act, correct?
Not you, the Common Council.
The council has to, so we don't have to have them before it goes to them?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Those were the procedural questions. Oh, no, there was a third question. It's substantive. Did I read correctly in the, what's it called, the manual? Thank you, administrative manual, that the Planning Commission is reviewing the major site plan reviews when they're concurrent with it? Okay.
That is correct.
Okay,
You
so
read
that's
that.
been a change since the last time?
We clarified that. That was a point that we discussed
Yes.
with all of you in February, and we had clarified that, specifically that note. So that is correct.
Okay, great.
Owen Kearney with City Planning Commission, I apologize.
Well, that's a good change, I think. Thank you.
We agree.
No comments, more than questions, so I can wait till there's emotions if someone's going to make one.
I do have a request. We were talking, it's possible, with the 50 people that were here and 28 that made comments, and we've got 13 pages of commentary here from the public input, there are still people who have made comments later today on our email. Could you just briefly discuss those sessions you had in the community? The Planning Commission was not present, but you were meeting with community groups to talk about rezone. Could you just lay out some of the times and locations you did those things?
I sure can. We started the project, really, particularly the public engagement process, in 2016, quite a few years ago. And in looking at it, taking a closer look at it over the weekend, we held just almost exactly 100 public meetings between 2016 and now. And that would include even just the recent informational meetings that we had held with this body and the Planning Commission, the Common Council. But the majority of them were in the community. And in looking at those meetings, they were in every quadrant of the city. They were at just about every public library. They were at every city high school. They were at many of the middle schools and other schools in the community. We were in each of the TNT districts, the neighborhood districts. So, but they were also with housing advocacy groups, real estate groups, advocates for greater accessibility, a variety of different, for lack of better words, specialized groups that wanted to meet, the downtown committee, neighborhood business organizations. We heard earlier about the East Genesee Regents Association. We had presented to them. So we have really been in every neighborhood in the community. We've been in all the formal settings, the TNT districts, or excuse me, the TNT meetings, those regularly scheduled meetings, but we understand not everybody attends them. So we held meetings at other venues, including in this room, in the City Hall atrium, and as I said, in many of the schools and libraries throughout our community. And so it was a robust process, and that public input got us where we are today. We've had essentially 4 to 5 substantive revisions of the document, of the rezone ordinance and rezone map, that have been guided by that public input. You're doing too much of this, you're not doing enough of that. Have you looked at this? Hey, this corridor is, you should take another look at the zoning here or there. There have been changes along the way, and much of that has been guided by that public input. And so we've had a robust public input process. Obviously, the COVID pandemic didn't help that. There was probably a year and a half where we were really limited. We did a couple virtual meetings and attended a few of those TNT meetings virtually and things like that, but it's not the same. But it is something that since then, really since last fall, going through that seeker process, that is has a robust engagement, public input process, received well over, I believe it was over 200 public comments regarding rezone. Final additional edits were made based on that public input to the seeker process. So I could talk at length about it, but as you can imagine, over a multi-year period, close to 100 public meetings in every neighborhood in our community, that helped guide and refine this process over a series of different editions, essentially various drafts. The public input has been important. It has been broad, and it has really helped improve this project and get us to where we are today. So happy to answer any more detailed questions about that, but that's perhaps a broad overview of what we have done, and I think suffice it to say it's been a big component of this project.
Right. The reason we always talk about things on the record is because we do like to cover if there's been a concern raised by members of the public. Sometimes it's the clarification. The commission didn't sit, as a panel in any of these meetings, but outreach efforts were made.
Yeah.
And you mentioned tomorrow's neighborhood today.
Yes.
And neighborhood watch groups and high school town hall meetings.
And I should mention that one of the important additional aspects of rezone is improving the public notification process, the public awareness process, and the things that you heard tonight, the special permits and various things like that, improving the community's awareness and ability to participate in the process that you all just had. People speaking in favor, people speaking in opposition, people being aware of what's going in their neighborhood. We're keeping many of those, existing public noticing features that the zoning office does. A certain buffer area around a project gets a notification, but beefing that up, putting more information on the website, putting more information on the project site. And that's a big one. That is something that people said, these things happen downtown and we're not unaware of it. And maybe it was posted in the newspaper and maybe it's posted here, but we go by up and down this, Valley Drive, Meadowbrook, Butternut, South Ave, whatever corridor it is, we're up and down this corridor all the time, and we didn't know anything was happening. So having that on-site notification is one of those aspects that came out of the public engagement process that we put in here that we believe is an additional asset to rezone, to really get your meetings. Maybe you may have more speakers, but we feel that at least giving people the information that they can go look, they can research it online, and obviously if they want to come down or write to you or come down and speak in person in favor or in opposition, they have the ability to do that. So again, tying elements of rezone back to that public engagement process, it's a big part of what we did, and it's a big part of rezone moving forward.
That on-site visibility of kind of project notification was there will be an important step forward in terms of informing the public.
Agreed.
In addition to the methodology that's used already, but an enhanced way to bring it to the public's attention.
Mm-hmm. We agree.
Could you give me just a brief description of what a in-person community engagement session or meeting look like?
Sure. There was a range of them. Some of them, we typically brought information for the public to consider. So in working with the Rezone project team and working with our consultants, we would develop materials for public review and presentation. And I should say, we started by asking the community early on, what's working well and what's not working so well? What are elements of the current zoning ordinance that you've either are unaware of and generally working well, and what's not? And so those things that were working well, there's many elements that are moving forward that we didn't change. But there are various items, the public information, public noticing was a good example we just talked about, of something that's not working well. So we would present essentially parts of the zoning ordinance, parts of the zoning map, specific elements, particularly as before we had a comprehensive, a consolidated draft. It was essentially chapters. So we would talk about certain series of meetings would just focus on the new land uses, modernizing land uses. We would have a section on procedures. We would present that, receive feedback. We had multiple meetings just focused on the zoning map, where we were out in the community talking about the zoning map, having big full-size presentations, either indoor or outdoor. I recall one on Westcott Street. We were out at the Westcott Community Center. The map was blowing all over the place. But the point being is that many of those meetings were targeted on materials that we had prepared, knowing that when you get to this point, presenting 250 pages is difficult to do. It's a lot. I mean, you guys are looking at 10 to 15-page proposals, and it can be a robust discussion. This is 250, I should mention, down from 350 in the current zoning ordinance, but it's still a lot, and even though we feel it's easier and more concise to use, it's a lot for people to digest, and we understand that. So during the preceding years, presenting different chapters, different specific elements, over a series of years, consolidating that into one full draft, taking that back out to the public. And so hopefully that gives you a better sense of how we did this. We didn't always just have a 250-page document that we were presenting to the public. It was much more incremental, and that public input, again, was really guided us to where we are today.
So you just explained that basically this was rolled out in increments in different neighborhoods. So if I lived in one neighborhood, you brought chapter 13, but if you came to the north side, like hypothetically, was it always the same material showed at all of these, almost you said 100?
Yes.
Do you have
well, the material evolved, but your point about let's say we would go out and talk about the procedures.
Mm-hmm.
We did that, and we would stop at Corcoran, at Fowler, at Nottingham, and at Henniger. And so we would present the same material in all of those different quadrants. And so it wasn't something that where we skipped around and did different information in different neighborhoods. When we had, again, significant amount of new information, we would go out geographically and make sure we hit different areas of the city.
Okay. Do you have any documentation of each of these community engagement meetings that you held?
I do, yes.
Okay. Was there a sign-in sheet for these meetings?
Many of them there were.
Okay. Could you provide us with those sign-in sheets for those engagements that you said took place?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I could surely provide you a list of all those engagements. And again, those are a matter of public record. They were frequently posted on the city's website. They were posted, if you go back and look at all the TNT meeting minutes, which I spent some time today doing, just to kind of look through some of these things, but sure, we can provide that.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is, by agreeing to do that, you're basically saying that you have a sign-in sheet and a location that would match.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying I can give you a list of meeting dates and locations. Not all of those.
So you don't have a sign-in sheet?
Not for all of them, no.
So which ones, do you have any that? You just said they did.
Yeah.
So could you provide that?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Like for a TNT meeting, I was a guest at that meeting. I didn't necessarily keep a sign-in sheet.
So I'm not speaking for you. I'm speaking in regards to community members who showed up and walked in this building into that building with the idea of they're coming to be informed and give their opinion and their insight, which is rightfully theirs, on rezone. They walked in that room. You're saying there was a sign-in sheet, and they signed that.
Sure.
So I'm asking, can you provide that to prove that you had this meeting, and at what location, and who signed in?
Yes, I will provide you everything I have, but I would caution against a sign-in sheet being the only proof of a meeting.
Oh, I didn't say it was the only. I just asked one of many.
Sure. I can provide you that list, and we'll do so. Okay. I can provide you many sign-in sheets. The ones that I have, I will happily provide. But again, when I was talking to the Greater Association of Realtors, I didn't necessarily get a sign-in sheet. When I presented at EGRA, I didn't necessarily get a sign-in sheet. So I guess for the record, I don't necessarily have 100 sign-in sheets, but I do have a list of those meetings, which I will happily provide you.
Okay, so...
And sign-in sheets where you had them.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
All right, thank you.
One more procedural issue.
Sure.
So in the administrative manual, on
Yes.
page 29, there's a little chart. It says site plan review thresholds. And I'm a little confused by the last line. It says for MX4 and MX5 districts, minor site plan, zoning administrator decision, all projects, with an asterisk. So does that mean, what does that mean? Because then the next column says major site plan, city planning commission decision for MX4, MX5 districts, none, with an asterisk. So I'm not quite sure I understand what all projects means under minor site plan and none under major site plan in MX4 and MX5.
I believe that is, and I can grab my manual here, that in those districts, the major site plan review, and you said that was page?
29, top of the page, the little box up above. I guess the way I was reading for example, the first line, it says for a residential development, if there's 4 to 7 new dwelling units, then it's a minor site plan review. So I got my head around that.
Right.
So then for MX4 and MX5 districts, all projects are a minor site plan review, but then when you look at major site plan review, it says none. So I'm not sure what happens in MX4 and MX5. And it may just be a grammar thing, but I still want to know what the intent is.
The intent there is that those projects would be, I think, generally considered minor site plan review, and I'm just looking at this. Unless referred to by the zoning administrator to the city planning commission. I think that is something we built into the minor site plan review process, that the zoning administrator, in this case administratively, the zoning office, can review them, those projects. And then upon referral, they could be referred to the planning commission, but not automatically that wouldn't necessarily be a planning commission review.
Okay, I guess I'm being dense. So in an MX4, MX5 district, any project, all projects would be assumed to have a major site plan review. So up above, residential, non-residential, and mixed use all have a threshold that tells us, yes, this is a minor site plan review. And is there but also in MX4 and MX5, those are also all major site plan reviews? And then, again, if you go to the last column, are we saying that in MX4 and MX5 districts, there would never be a major site plan review? Because it says none?
Unless referred by the zoning administrator, that is correct.
Oh. So I got really excited about that other change, now I'm not. So if there was a major project downtown, the planning commission would not look at it unless the zoning administrator's office said we would?
That is correct. It would be upon referral of the zoning administrator.
Ah.
And we have established the criteria for which the zoning administrator would do that. I think that's an important aspect of it.
But it's also, though, at the discretion of an individual. It's not like, since it says none, unless referred, unless the referral components are requirements. So in other words, if the zoning administrator was looking at a project in MX4 or MX5 and 3 boxes were checked, that individual had to recommend it for major site plan review by the commission, it's still discretionary then?
That is correct. Based on that criteria. And I hear what you're saying. It is ultimately yes, but it's not without some criteria established upon which to do that.
Okay. So the concern I thought went away just came back. But I just find that problematic that there could be a major project in one of those 2 districts, and the body that theoretically is impaneled to review these kinds of things for conformance with the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan likely would not have a role. So, okay, thank you for clarifying that.
One last quick question.
Sure.
Considering the community concerns around the various studies that was done in regards to leading up to this project, I guess my question would be, what studies were done, and like, how did you as yourself or your counterparts, how did you decide on what studies would be done to lead up to starting this project, to getting it to where it is?
So one of the things that ultimately guided us into the update of the zoning ordinance, which is before you, is the development of the comprehensive plan, which was the city completed almost 10 years ago, which recommended an update to the zoning, largely because, for the same reason as we're here today, it had been outdated, it hadn't been comprehensively updated, and so the comprehensive plan broadly recommended updating the zoning ordinance. And so the city, and specifically the planning division, sought out funding to do that from New York State, and was awarded funding to do that, and that is what prompted, perhaps the short version of what prompted us to start this project, based on a recommendation of the adopted comprehensive plan.
So again, maybe I'll restate my question.
Sure.
My question was exactly what studies were done, and how did you decide, like, on which ones you were going to do?
So we did a lot of
sorry, pardon me. Again, I'm asking this question based on the community concerns around the studies that were done leading up to this project. So I'll ask the question again. What were those studies, if any, were done? And then how did you decide on what studies you would do?
So municipalities, and I think specifically in New York State, must have an updated or have a comprehensive plan. And so that was, I think maybe we're talking about the same thing and using different language. That was a process by which the city, with a robust public engagement process and advisory committee and more, identified a range of initiatives, and the update to the zoning was part of that. And that was a recommendation that adoption of the comprehensive plan, which we studied, we analyzed, we took public input and testimony on and said, hey, this is something that is not working well. It is not guiding investment and development and improving quality of life in our community the way it could. It's not producing the housing income, the housing outcomes that we're looking for. The process is not as clear as it should be. The land uses aren't updated and haven't been since in comprehensively since the mid-60s. And so that was really the impetus to prompt the zoning work to start, the development of that plan. And I should mention the adoption of that plan by the city. So in a sense, like, was there a specific like neighborhood study? No, it was a comprehensive plan that we looked at, the Common Council adopted, and that really paved the way for the zoning work that we started.
So you're basically saying the zoning department did not do any studies, and if there were any studies done that were considered, it was done by the city based on their strategic plan. Is that what you're basically saying?
The comprehensive plan prompted the start of the zoning. When we started this process, we did a significant amount of research and analysis at the beginning as part of the rezone process. So developing a what was the specific document? The annotated outline, the initial documents that we prepared as part of rezone, which, again, I can share those with you also, really looked at the things that are working well, the things that aren't working, studied the current zoning ordinance, made recommendations about what we should do, and that really led into the subsequent preparation of this document.
Okay. And then my last question was kind of, I guess, more of a statement. So earlier you mentioned that one of the changes to rezone is to make it more engaging to the community. How would you have got to that conclusion that needed to be changed unless you had done something to see that it was an issue going forward. How did you get to that conclusion to make the new change? I applaud you for making the change.
Sure.
But with no study done, how did you come to that conclusion that it needed to be more engaging and that community members were not a part of that process?
Sure.
How did you identify that to get to that point?
I sat in the cafeteria at Corcoran, at Nottingham, at the Westcott Community Center, at Mundy Branch Library, at Pettit, and people said, hey, these things are happening and we don't know enough about these decisions that you're making. Mm-hmm. And we started thinking, hey, how do we increase the public awareness, the neighborhood awareness of things in people's community? And so that was a good example of how the public engagement that we did as part of Rezone, listening to people saying, hey, we've got to improve the notification procedures. And maybe they didn't say exactly that, but they said, I want to know about what's going on in my neighborhood. And so part of what we did, the refinements that we made were, for instance, that on-site public notification. So people walking around the block, driving by, going to the end of the street and saying, hey, oh yeah, they were working on this. There's that sign. I can look up what's being proposed. I can offer comments. I can even just kind of search what it is. Is it a parking lot? Is it a new gaming facility? Is it a restaurant? Is it, whatever it is? And so really it was listening to the public with concerns about the lack of current engagement that prompted that change.
Okay, and this is my last question.
Sure.
You mentioned going to a couple locations. What is the requirement for community engagement in regards to rezone? Was there any requirements to the number of meetings you have to have or anything of that nature?
The public meeting requirement is really largely what we're doing now. The public hearing before the Planning Commission, before the council, performing that during seeker public engagement. But the 80 to 90 meetings that we held that I talked about earlier and that I'll provide you a list of, were because we wanted to talk to the public. We wanted to hear the community. So I think the short answer is, there is no specific requirement to do that. Okay. We wanted to do that. The project was improved because of it. And I think the community, largely the fact that it would have been tough to stand here and say we didn't hold any public engagement. So I think it was... I'm
not saying you didn't.
Sure.
And then when you pick those locations, how did you pick those locations? Why did you pick those locations that you picked?
We scattered throughout neighborhoods, scattered throughout the city, largely looking for public places, not looking to hold them in a restaurant or a coffee shop where, some people might like to go, others not. Looking at places, community places, high schools, schools in general, libraries, city buildings, Onondaga Fire Barn, Meacham Park, Schiller Park, had numerous, Westcott Community Center. Have it in places that are in neighborhoods that we know neighborhood residents feel comfortable going to and participating in, and that we're open for anybody and everybody to attend. So that was really our motivation. Okay. Hit all parts of the city and make these places publicly accessible. Okay. That motivated our selection.
And you said most of the, if you want to call it marketing of this and sharing the information, this was done how? You said your website?
Website, social media, press releases, neighborhood notifications, Nextdoor, public notices.
How did those go out? The neighborhood notification and the public notices. How did those go out?
A variety of different ways. The city issued many of them. We worked with project partners to provide notifications. So if we were meeting at a TNT meeting, we would work with them to help notice the meeting. We would release public notices.
How?
All the ways I just mentioned, social media, press, radio, television. We had coverage really all sorts of ways. And then in-person sort of hard copies in various different facilities too.
Okay, and this is my last
Sure.
Can you provide proof of those postings on social media of those various meetings?
We would have to talk to the administration simply because Owen didn't personally post all of those things. It happened through various entities within the city. So we certainly can check on that for you, dating back the number of years to see if we
I
can.
mean, any post anywhere, it can be backtracked. It can be found. So yes, I would love personally to see the proof of how this project was shared with the public, considering again their concerns that are rightfully should be considered around the leading up to this project and how they were properly informed in a fair and equitable way. Thank you.
Okay, I will we'll get that information to you.
Thank you.
May I provide a few comments to the board just for
Go ahead,
consideration?
please.
For whatever it's worth. So the zoning ordinance that is what we now call rezone is done as a result of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan dictates how zoning goes forward. So you need to base your proposal off of the comprehensive plan. My understanding, and again, you all know I've only been here a year, but my understanding is that the process was undertaken with the help of a consultant that was hired by one of the city agencies to facilitate Owen and his team in putting together the outreach, the program itself, how it was going to roll out, and that was all done accordingly. My further understanding is that the location of the meetings was done and designed to reach all aspects and regions of the city, and to be held in various places so that people felt comfortable coming, whether they didn't feel comfortable coming to a chamber or they didn't feel comfortable going to one location, they would go to a neighborhood meeting or a school or a library. In addition, to answer your question, there is no requirement that any public hearings of the nature that Owen was talking about take place as part of the process. The public hearings that are required under law are required by this body. If you have a public hearing, which you did, it is required of the Common Council to hold a public hearing. Seeker, which has been completed, also requires a public hearing as part of the review process of the environmental impacts. So all of that was done in accordance with the statutes that govern those processes. The last thing I will say about this document is it is a living, breathing document. The second it ultimately gets adopted, changes will be required because everything around us changes. And the only thing that I can hope is that we look at it, analyze it, and review it every year, every 5 years, versus every 60 or 70 years. I think that is really the fundamental issue here. We have waited 70 years or whatever it is to review this code, and so the process is monumental. And certainly, it is this board's prerogative to ask for additional information, to not choose to make a recommendation tonight, ultimately to make a recommendation with whatever changes you would like to see to the Common Council. Whenever that happens, and whenever the Common Council ultimately moves and does whatever it is going to do, the second that is done, something will need to be changed. And so whether we wait another week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, we're never going to be able to address everything because something will immediately change. So we are happy to provide you, George, with everything we can identify that is responsive to your request relative to the notifications that went out. Owen has a list of the 99 or 100 meetings that were held aside from what this body is holding and what the Common Council ultimately will hold. And we'll continue to provide you with as much information as we can. I just wanted to let you know the broad spectrum of what and how zoning takes place in terms of starting with the comprehensive plan and moving beyond that.
Thank you. That's helpful to have that for context here. additional questions for Owen while he's at the podium, or additional comments among the commission members relative to the rezone proposal?
Yes. And in part, thank you for your comments. And I think I respectfully disagree with not that it's not a living document, and certainly not that it's woefully insufficient or bad or anything like that. I think this is so much better than what we have. But there's a part of me that thinks it's like close but no cigar. And the concerns I have, I'm not sure they're the kinds of things that would be easily amended because they're core principles that I find that I have issue with. And I also am not sure how those changes would come about. So, for example, I still firmly believe that the design and development standards, as well as some of the allowable uses in the new zoning classifications, are inherently inconsistent with what we say the goals are for some of those classifications. So, for example, and I'm not going to go into a lot of these, but in MX1, the goal is to retain what was traditionally residential character, but allow soft commercials in. Yet the design and development standards, the ability to have a 10,000 square foot lot, is pretty much inconsistent with that goal of retaining residential character where MX1 is mapped. How do you change that? I think that's a fundamental philosophical question. So for me, that's very difficult. I find that the same with R2, R3, and R4 in terms of, again, where they're mapped and what we say the goal is. So that's a concern of mine. Similarly, I know that there are very excited and well-meaning advocates of this community, as I am, who want to see us grow and develop, literally have the population grow and have greater financial investment. But the way we have applied some of these zoning classifications decentralizes the densest development. We have MX4 and R4 all over the place. And if you understand the tradition of American city development, urban design and planning, it's the core of a city where the greatest density is. By dispersing that density, we are ignoring that tradition, we're ignoring that fact about how cities work. And again, that's a core problem for me in terms of the way this is mapped. Even if some of the conflicts I just mentioned between details and goals for the classifications were set aside, if we just look at how those classifications are mapped, and we could respond to those traditional patterns and how cities work, it would be more acceptable to me. And again, how does one fix that? So when the first 5-story building is proposed on James Street in Eastwood, and there's no way, well, we probably wouldn't even be involved in the review. So the zoning administrator could say, sure. And everyone who lives in Eastwood is going to scream, but who are they screaming to? Because if it's a minor site plan review or a major site plan review, there might not even be a public hearing. And if they say it's inconsistent with their neighborhood to have a big, tall building like that on James Street, what is the recourse for the general public? So again, the idea that we're decentralizing dense development in the higher numbered classifications in MX and residential is problematic. And I also still believe that there is an over-application of these classifications in general. And by that, I mean the area that they cover. In some places, there's an MX district that maybe rightfully could be very successfully grown and developed if it was 2 blocks long. But in some cases, it's 8 blocks long, which means that the first great project could be in block 1, and 6 years later, the next great project is in block 5, And the excitement and the synergy that we want from those kinds of projects being adjacent to one another has been missed, because zoning is not directing people to develop in that way. We're actually allowing it to be dispersed. So for me, a number of those classifications should be scaled back on the map. And again, I don't know, how does that get fixed later if it's not fixed now? And I find in particular that, and maybe this goes to something George was saying about the studies for this. Unfortunately, there's no housing study that says how much housing we need of any particular type in any particular location. There's no assessment of where we need improved transit to support all the transit development we're talking about. So a lot of the classifications as they're mapped, to me, don't correspond either to historic population trends or objective studies that talk about future growth and development. And again, to me, and perhaps I'm just a little bit more conservative when it comes to this, but it would seem that if a lot of these districts in the new classifications were smaller, and we do have this miraculous increase in population and interest in development, that we could then expand all of those districts because they've been so successful, as opposed to starting out big and saying in 10 years, wow, that was a mistake. We should make them smaller, because by then we're already living with the individual projects that are in disparate locations. And then lastly, I was very excited when I realized that maybe we at the Planning Commission or any future Planning Commission was going to be able to do major site plan review, but if in the two areas where we tend to see the greatest investment, what will be MX4 and MX5, and the Planning Commission does not have a role unless the whim of whoever is a zoning administrator says, oh yeah, let's ask the Planning Commission today for some comments. I just find that absolutely misguided. So again, with all due respect that it's a living document and we can make changes, I don't see how those fundamental issues get addressed in a change in the future or the near future. I mean, does the Planning Commission hear a project application? Well, we wouldn't even hear some of these project applications. I'm not sure what would be the predicate for someone to say, oh, we need to have that kind of change. And it's not the number of square feet of a sign or how many parking spaces someone has. Again, this is sort of conventional wisdom about urban design and planning, which would relate to the comprehensive plan. So I find those to be things that are lacking in the document that could be fixed fairly easily, in my view, if only to adjust the map at first and to adjust the review procedures. And then maybe some of the definitions get dealt with later on. But these are serious concerns that I have. So, thank you.
Thank you. My only comment, obviously, there are a lot of notes and probably some follow-up provided, or I can provide, obviously providing the board some follow-up or the commission some follow-up things. But I do imagine your question regarding the Planning Commission's role. I don't see why the Planning Commission couldn't play a role in that. In any subsequent changes, whether that's 6 months or a year from now, as a body that's very much involved in zoning and participates in various different zoning decisions. Again, I think it makes sense that the Planning Commission could be involved and could influence potential changes.
I guess it's not that we wouldn't have a role. Maybe I was being a little melodramatic, but for example, I mean, if I had my druthers the day after this is adopted, I would make a motion that we would amend the map to reduce all the MX2 classification areas down by X number of blocks or square footage. But how does, I mean, do I literally do that at a meeting one night? Do I just raise my hand and say, I move under new business that I would like to do this?
Right.
I mean,
And-
I would think the general public would find that pretty indefensible, because I'm not doing it based other than, my professional viewpoint. But it's also, again, it's kind of fundamental, so it seems like we should almost have that conversation, or I've been having it, but it's not that we may not be involved. I don't understand what the trigger would be.
Sure.
And how that goes forward. When I think of in the past, and how there have been zoning changes brought before this body, in many cases, it was because an applicant came forward, didn't like something, went to the staff, and the staff said, oh, well, we could maybe change the zoning, and not just to help you, but it might be better zoning for this particular neighborhood, and then poof, it's in front of us. Yes, if a member of the Planning Commission could also raise that issue, perhaps that is a way to move towards some changes. But again, for some of these things, they're sort of fundamental concerns, so I'm...
Well, and just a couple brief remarks. I mean, you had talked about a few different things, like the MX1, for example, the limit on square foot size for MX1, which we do have, the height limit on MX2. The current zoning does not have any of those current restrictions at all.
Oh, I know.
And so I would counter that we are introducing James Street. There is no, particularly in the business district, which our MX2 largely mimics the current Business A zoning district. There are no height restrictions. So your concern about height restrictions, I would offer, we are beginning to mitigate that it's capped at 3 to 4 stories, that it's with the design standards, limits on parking coverage, new signage requirements, new landscaping requirements. So you're right. I think it's important to note that James Street's an example where a 7-story building could come before this body. Rezone is reducing that, is putting in design standards, signage, landscaping, lighting, many of which don't exist today. And so I would offer, I guess, for the benefit of this body and for the public, that rezone introduces many standards that don't currently exist, that begin to get, and I think your point is it could go further, but I would offer that particularly when you're introducing, in this case, new design regulations citywide, our approach was to do it in a way that we felt would be beneficial, would positively affect that relationship of the Eastwood business, the business district on James Street and the adjacent property owners, the Eastwood neighborhood. And so to do so in a way that was a incremental step forward, not just going from 0 to 100 with design standards, but putting some limitations on building height, introducing new mixed-use standards, allowing those design standards to move forward. So point well taken, and I don't disagree with some of your points, but I do think, particularly in those mixed-use districts, we are introducing a lot that doesn't currently exist. We could always go further, and I think that gets back to Sue's point, that I think we understand certain things upon adoption may have to be reined in, other things maybe we have to increase. But our suggestion is that these standards, particularly along our business districts, will be a vast improvement, is a place to begin, and that the ongoing dialogue with the public and with this body, and for that matter, the Common Council, is something that the city is very much committed to doing, and not waiting 5 years, but probably looking at it shortly thereafter. We know there's things that already we need to look at based on that housing study that isn't completed. And so, waiting for that complete, next thing you know, you're out 10 years, and we've got a lot of this good material in rezone. We've got affordable housing requirements. We have new design standards. We have improved public notification processes. We have an administrative manual. There's a lot in there that I would offer is worth acting on, and perhaps not tonight, but surely in the near future, with a commitment that we continue to work together. And that's what I'm here to commit to. I can personally commit to that, but I think on behalf of the city, I can commit to that too.
I just wanted to add, from the mapping perspective, so a lot of those, because we've had this conversation many times, and I agree with you 100% as far as the urban, optimal planning and zoning, but every parcel has to have a zoning district, right? Has to be included in a zoning district. So a lot of that original map, I talked to Owen and Clarion and see how they did. They looked at the assessment records, they looked at the current zoning district, and then you look at it on the ground. Now the other thing is you can't just change something to what you want it to be because there's a takings issue, okay? With the Constitution, you can't create a takings. I mean, we would, with 42,000 parcels, you have 42,000 chances of creating a takings issue and coming under lawsuit and losing. So if you downzone too much without somebody's permission or without their consent, then you run the risk of putting the city at risk of being sued for a takings situation. All right, and that's happened all across the country. It's happened with Portland with the growth boundaries.
Oh, yeah, it has. But I don't.
So my point is, when we look at these parcels, we can't just make it what we want it. We have to make it what is consistent with what the land is now, because otherwise you end up with a lot of pre-existing non-conforming uses, right?
I don't know who that is. Did somebody kick something?
Do it. I moved back.
There we go.
I understand that the point you're making.
Yeah, it's just, I'm pointing out it's not as easy as just making it what you want.
I'm not saying it's making it what I want. It goes back to my earlier point that if you look at physical character, you look at uses, and
Thanks, Jeff.
Kill it.
This is why I don't talk during meetings.
I appreciate the point you're making. I'm not talking about a drastic deviation from either what was traditionally there. If anything, I'm making the argument, the exact argument you're making, that if we look at what is there, some of what we're proposing is drastically different. I mean, you and I could sit down and look at half of those MX4s, and I would tell you, you're making a lot of things possible that traditionally never were in those locations, that would be inconsistent with physical character, and just from a land use perspective and a density perspective, traditionally would not be in those locations. And without any kind of market study that shows that people are just lining up to do multi-million-dollar projects here in all of those locations, it just seems like a bit of an overreach. So if anything, I'm arguing your point that we shouldn't be looking at making classifications that alter character and alter use as greatly as I believe we actually are doing. That's exactly my point. So anyway, at 25 minutes of 9, 8, whatever, is it?
I don't want to cut off discussion unless the microphone goes haywire again. Very good discussion and responses this evening. And I think, given that there have been a few requests for additional information, given the hour of the night, I'm thinking this commission is probably not likely to be in a position this evening to consider a motion to go to the Common Council with respect to rezone. So we'll return to this discussion item at our next meeting, which will be later this month, 3 weeks from tonight. And presumably by then, the information that my colleague had requested will be available and can be reviewed maybe in advance even, and put us closer to a deliberation on a motion that could provide a recommendation to the council on rezone.
Appreciate that, and we'll absolutely work on providing that specific material, providing, obviously, I have notes here, any follow-up clarifications or things that might help in some of the concerns, help clarify concerns you have, or perhaps help us move this forward is absolutely what we want to do. And I think we have the material and the work we've done lends itself to that, and we're gonna make sure we continue to communicate with you.
Okay, all right, thank you. So this item remains on our agenda. We have a couple more things for this evening.
Is the public able to chime in on this if they wanted to at the moment?
No, the
Okay.
public hearing is closed.
May I just ask them if there is going to be a follow-up meeting where it's going to be presented, and that you would consider moving this forward, that you would open that up to public comment again at that time? My contention is that although Owen has defended that there have been many public meetings, most of those meetings were based on input, asking questions as to what you would like to see, presenting from the city's point what they would like to have rezoned and considered. As of last week, when I came to that meeting, there was a lot of discussion of dissension, there was a lot of unclarity expressed in the understanding of the language in the ordinance, and especially particularly the mapping. That map, final map for consideration, was not released the morning of that meeting last week. We don't believe that as a public, that there's any chance that people can review and respond that evening to a finalization of the mapping that morning. I don't believe that is fair or, an honest effort by the city to communicate with the public, answer questions. You heard from people that questioned the mapping that had hired a lawyer just to come down here to talk.
This is comment being made when the public hearing has been closed. This is public comment, and we appreciate his concern, but it probably should be addressed in a letter to mayor or common council. The public hearing was closed, and I hate to cut anyone off, but it's not fair to the rest of the public to allow one gentleman to express his opinion in this manner when the hearing's been closed, and I apologize profusely, but that's what the law says.
Again, I would like to reiterate that we were asked to make public comment on something, on a document and a map.
All right, sir,
Hold on 1 second. As council just explained, your opinion and insight is greatly appreciated. We're not trying to silence you. The proper way to go about it, as we want everyone else to do and be held accountable how they go about things, we're going to expect the same from you, and ask that any concerns or comments you have, you can send a letter or submit a letter to council with those concerns, just to be fair.
And the common council will also, once this matter comes before the common council, there will be another public hearing.
Well,
and I have a
still being promoted, I think, in too rapid pace.
Comment.
Thank you.
Public opinion.
We understand.
Or a review process by the public to look at that document. Sorry to interrupt.
I agree.
I apologize for.
I agree with the gentleman.
This is why we have a public hearing. Please, everybody stop making comments. The public hearing was closed at the last meeting. Your next opportunity to speak on this matter will be at the common council public hearing, and you're absolutely welcome to submit your letters to common council, to the mayor, to express your opinions, as you should do, as everybody should do. But this forum is no longer an appropriate forum. And again, we apologize, but that's what state law provides, so that everybody has a chance. If we were going to allow you two to speak and say, yes, I agree, here, then we should have noticed this to let people speak again. So I apologize, but you cannot speak anymore, please.
Okay, I'd like to submit 2 letters right now then. One to the department, one to the commission.
All right, sir, you may submit anything to the zoning office or to the mayor's office, but not here, not now, tonight. And there will be no more discussion public discussion on this item. Subject to any comments or questions on behalf of the Planning Commission, if you wish to continue this discussion, it's your prerogative, or if you want to move on with the agenda, that is also up to you.
I think... something, George?
Again, I apologize for the interruption. I just think it's a serious public concern.
This is for Owen directly. In regards to the sign-in sheets that I asked for, I just asked that those be like original copies, please.
Yes. You want me to scan those and send them to you, or?
No, just say that again.
Give them to staff.
So you can just give them.
Sure. I'll make sure everything's provided to Jeff. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen.
Thank you.
Okay, I think with that, we'll move to the remainder of the agenda for this evening.
The last item on this evening's agenda is a discussion item for a number of properties on the block bounded by East Genesee Street to the south, Ashworth Place to the north, Pine Street to the east, and I don't remember the I guess it would be I don't know the avenue to the west. At any rate, there are a number of applications that will be coming before the Planning Commission, re-subdivision, to combine 16 properties into one new lot to facilitate the construction of a 5-story apartment building that will be reviewed as a project site review and a special permit application. The proposal is to construct a 5-story mixed-use building with 286 dwelling units, approximately 2,000 square feet of tenant space, and 143 on-site parking spaces on a proposed 78,826 square foot lot. As I stated previously, the proposal requires a subdivision to combine 16 properties situated within residential Class B and residential Class C zoning districts into one new lot, a special permit for a multi-family dwelling for those properties zoned residential Class C, and a project site review for demolition and new construction on those properties zoned residential Class B. And the proposal requires a variance for yards and structural coverage for the residential Class B zoned districts. The Board of Zoning Appeals is scheduled to hold a public hearing for the companion area variance on April 20th, and the purpose of this discussion is to afford the City Planning Commission an opportunity to provide any recommendations and/or comments to the Board of Zoning Appeals regarding the area variance. I would just point out that the Planning Commission did agree to designate itself as lead agency. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but that was back in late February. I got the letter sent out in mid-March, around March 13th, so the 30-day notice or 30-day window for seeker lead agency does not close until April 13th. And the applicant's representative is here to address any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ben Harrell at 300 South State Street, Suite 600. I guess I'll just open it up to questions first. We've been in front of the board once before. Brian Bouchard from our office, along with the owner, Chris Geiger, was here and presented to you about this project. Jeff recapped it pretty well. We'd need a subdivision, a handful of variances from the BZA, and there are a couple of waivers that we will present to you at the public meeting. It's pretty late in the night, so I'll just open it up to you guys for questions to save time.
Questions?
Or if you have any comments or recommendation for the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay. I just because of the volume of the addresses here, did we discuss, when we had a discussion with Brian Bouchard, any other representative, the locations? I remember we talked about problems on Genesee Street, and there was an issue of them being close to what we consider the area where these kinds of buildings should be built. So this is, I would call it closer to downtown than the Three Sisters. This is not that far out on Genesee Street, is that correct?
This is directly across from the Walnut on 505.
Okay. Just ask if my colleagues recall, that was our concern, that the structure be closer to.
The first time this came around, whenever that was, years ago,
It was further.
no, it was this location.
It was.
Yes, because it went up to Ashworth Place, and then it went away, and now it's back again. But as has been pointed out, if rezone were to go through, this would be the last block to the east, yeah, but right now it doesn't, which the developer knows, but chose to start this for financing reasons, as I recall. Knowing full well the implications. They would have to go to the BZA.
Fair to the applicant, this is just a kind of a refresher of what we were talking about, because we do remember the scale of the demolition and construction, and we remember the height of the structure, location, and now forward thinking is.
I don't know, is it as tall as the proposal from a few years ago? I think it is.
I
It's a little
cannot
lower.
honestly speak on that. We weren't part of that application.
Okay.
I'm not.
I will double check, but I think the 2019 proposal was for a 6-story structure, and this is a 5-story.
Yeah, I think it came down.
Down a floor, maybe?
I've got the application here, so I will try to find that out.
I'm almost certain it's a floor lower.
I think it's basically the same footprint, though.
Same footprint, and now I see that they're actually, the courtyard idea you're developing, there actually is a space between each of the units.
Yeah, to help break up the building facade, it won't look like a giant
Because that was
single building, it'll help
concern.
break it up.
In the first application, there was a concern that there were colorations to suggest a separation, but there really were. It was just one long unit.
Other questions for the applicant's representative? Any particular words of wisdom for the BZA as they deliberate?
No other questions, thank you.
No? Okay. I guess we're good for tonight, and we'll see you at a subsequent meeting, assuming you have success with the BZA item.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for your patience.
Yes.
Sorry.
So, Jeff, any other new business items for tonight?
No, did you have any comments or recommendations to pass on to the Board of Zoning Appeals?
Apparently not.
Okay. There's no other
we could move
business that I'm aware of.
Just the authorizing the
Just the
public hearing.
authorization.
Right, for the next meeting, okay.
So, and we have before us a total of 6 new cases for our next meeting in April, and of course, carrying over 2 public hearings from this evening. And I think that will do it for the 24th. Is there a motion for those, to authorize those?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Those are approved for the 24th. And with there being no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Say nay. Abstentions? We are adjourned, and we will return on the 24th of April.